1984 is a dystopian novel written by George Orwell in 1949. The story takes place in a totalitarian future ruled by the party, headed by Big Brother, who controls all aspects of people's lives. The protagonist, Winston Smith, works at the Ministry of Truth, where he alters historical documents to adapt them to the official version of the party. Here is a full summary of all 1984 chapters. Chapter 1: Winston Smith, a lower-middle-class party member, arrives at his apartment in Victory Mansions and writes in his diary for the first time, defying the party and Big Brother, the omnipresent and omnipotent leader. He describes the oppressive life under the totalitarian regime, the constant surveillance through telescreens, and the omnipresent propaganda. Winston reflects on the perpetual war between Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, and introduces the concept of thought crime, the act of thinking of defying the government. Chapter 2: Winston helps a neighbor, Mrs. Parsons, with a broken sink and reflects on how family life is controlled by the party. Mrs. Parsons' children are fanatical members of the Junior Spies and watch their parents for disloyalty. Winston observes a young woman with a scarlet sash of the party and feels both attracted and repelled by her. Winston also recalls his wife, Catherine, and their unhappy marriage, which ended when she mysteriously disappeared. Chapter 3: Winston recalls his childhood and how war affected his family. The concept of doublethink is introduced, the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in the mind at the same time and accept both. The thought police is also introduced as a force that punishes those with rebellious thoughts. Winston describes how the party controls every aspect of life, including the past, present, and future. Chapter 4: Winston works at the Ministry of Truth, where he alters historical documents to match the party's official version. He reflects on the party's control over truth and history and how his job contributes to that manipulation. Winston also mentions the figure of Emmanuel Goldstein, the party's public enemy number one, and leader of the resistance movement called the Brotherhood. Chapter 5: Winston has lunch with his co-worker Syme, who works on language reduction. Syme explains how the party plans to control thought through newspeak, a simplified language designed to limit the expression of subversive ideas. Winston meets his colleague Parsons, a loyal and foolish party member, and wonders how the party can consider Parsons a model citizen while he himself is suspicious. Chapter 6: Winston reflects on his unsatisfying sex life with Catherine and how the party controls sexuality and human relationships to maintain its power. He also recalls a fleeting and transgressive sexual encounter with a prostitute and his desire to experience a genuine emotional and sexual connection outside the party's control. Chapter 7: Winston writes in his diary about his growing discontent with the party and how he wishes to join the mysterious Brotherhood, although he knows this means certain death. He also recalls an incident in which he realized the party had changed truth and history. Winston had found a photograph that proved the falsehood of a charge against 3 men the party had executed. Despite having evidence of the party's lie, Winston knows there is no way to use this information to fight the regime. Chapter 8: Winston visits the proletarian section of the city and is astonished by the poverty and despair of its inhabitants. He enters an antique shop and buys a blank diary and a glass figure. He talks with the shop owner, Mr. Charrington, who shows him a room upstairs that has no telescreen. Winston imagines what it would be like to live in that room, away from the party's surveillance. Part 2. Chapter 1: Winston sees the woman with the scarlet sash at the Ministry of Truth and believes she is a thought police member watching him. However, when she falls and hurts herself, she passes him a note that says, "I love you." Winston is shocked and thrilled by this act of rebellion. Chapter 2: Winston and the woman, Julia, meet secretly in the countryside and make love for the first time. Through their relationship, they both defy the party and experience a genuine emotional and sexual connection. Chapter 3: Winston and Julia continue meeting secretly and discuss how they wish they could join the Brotherhood to fight the party. They share their thoughts on life under the totalitarian regime and how their actions are acts of resistance. Chapter 4, Winston and Julia rent the telescreen-free room at Mr. Charrington's shop as a safe haven for their secret rendezvous. They continue to defy the party through their relationship and discuss how they can resist and maintain their love for each other. Chapter 5, Winston meets O'Brien, an inner party member, at his apartment. O'Brien claims to be a member of the Brotherhood and offers Winston the chance to join the resistance. Winston immediately accepts, although he knows this will lead to his destruction. Chapter 6, Winston and Julia read Goldstein's Forbidden Book together, which explains the theory and practice of oligarchical socialism and how the party maintains its power through perpetual war, surveillance, and control of truth. Although they are excited by the information they find in the book, they are also concerned about the consequences of their rebellion. Chapter 7, Winston and Julia are arrested by the thought police in the secret room. It is revealed that Mr. Charrington is actually a member of the thought police and that they have been watching them from the beginning. The lovers are separated and taken to prison. Chapter 8, Winston is imprisoned in the Ministry of Love, where he is tortured and subjected to physical and psychological abuse. Prisoners, including Winston, are forced to confess their crimes, although many of them are invented by the party. During his imprisonment, Winston encounters several familiar characters, including Parsons, who has been denounced by his own daughter. Part 3. Chapter 1, Winston is interrogated and tortured by O'Brien, who reveals that he was always a loyal party member and that the Brotherhood might not be real. O'Brien explains to Winston that the party's goal is to maintain absolute power through total control of the human mind and the destruction of any desire for individual freedom. Chapter 2, O'Brien continues to torture Winston and tries to cure him of his rebellious thinking. He teaches Winston the concept of doublethink and forces him to accept the party's contradictory statements, such as 2 + 2 = 5. Chapter 3, Winston is subjected to the final torture in room 101, where he faces his greatest fear, rats. O'Brien uses this fear to break Winston's spirit and force him to betray Julia by pleading for the rats to be released on her instead of him. Chapter 4, after his re-education and release, Winston encounters Julia, who has also been tortured and cured. They both admit to having betrayed each other and no longer feel love for one another. Winston has been completely dominated by the party and accepts his love for Big Brother. Chapter 5, Epilogue. Winston works at an insignificant job in the Ministry of Truth, where his rebellious past has been forgotten. He reflects on his new life under the party's total control and realizes that, despite everything, he has learned to love Big Brother. 1984 is a powerful warning about the dangers of totalitarianism and political oppression. Through the story of Winston and his struggle for freedom and love in a world controlled by the party, George Orwell highlights how the manipulation of truth, constant surveillance, and destruction of individuality can lead to the complete domination of the human being by an authoritarian regime. Please like and subscribe for new summaries.